And greetings to all of you from India. It's good to be back to a conference on real truth about health. And why wouldn't I come back? For me, reality is what matters, not illusions and constructs. Truth is what I live for. It's the breath of my life. And health is what keeps us going. We are going through a mega pandemic crisis right now in a strange, mysterious way. The symptoms change. We don't even really know the truth about the pandemic. But just in the last 2 days, I have lost people I know. So keep us in your mind and let us all continue to do our honest work to defend the health of the planet and the health of people, including the last person. I'm very blessed to be from India, which gave the world agroecology, organic farming. Albert Howard was sent to India to improve Indian agriculture. That's part of colonization. I get so amused. They're so desperate to improve us, and now the transhumanists want to enhance us. And just because they're so scared of life, they're scared of the body, they're scared of living systems, that all living systems are born, their health is maintained, and they die. And that is part of a beautiful process of renewal. We celebrate it in India. And you get an entire technology, an entire ideology evolve over the fiction of you'll be able to come back as enhanced beings. Or how can real food be accepted? You got to have enhanced food. If you're a meat eater, why do you want to eat real beef? No, wait for the impossible burger with 14 patents, which has been sprayed with Roundup when the GMO soya has been grown in the fields. The monarch butterfly has been pushed to extinction. The Amazon is being killed for growing GMO soya. So what I have learned over these many decades of first studying quantum theory, interconnectedness, non-separation, potential, and uncertainty, and then the 5 decades of my work in ecology, where the same principles get reiterated. Everything is interconnected. Diversity is the nature of nature, and we are part of nature. Because the illusion of colonialism was constructed very carefully. Bacon, father of modern science, says we are separate from the earth. And because we are separate from the earth, we can be her master, subjugate her. Descartes said living systems are not living systems. The croak of the animal you kill is just the croak of a machine. Or the Locke's or the Hobbes, or the Adam Smiths, and I look back here, because I studied physics, I never read this rubbish in school or college or through my early years of learning. I read them when I wanted to understand why were women in my regions standing up to defend nature, and why was the scientific system that was destroying nature legitimized. And then I found the roots. I followed the forest destruction, I followed the river destruction, I followed the destruction in Bhopal, when pesticides killed people, the destruction of the land of 5 rivers, Punjab, 1984, where I had done my MSc honors in physics. And I found behind all of this mode of thinking, that the earth is dead, our bodies are a pure machine, food is merely the fuel, and it's totally replaceable. And where we have landed with this is what I would call an anti-food system. I call it anti-food because food is supposed to nourish us. Food is supposed to give us health. Hippocrates said, let food be thy medicine. In Ayurveda, we say, annam sarva oshadhi. Annam is food, sarva oshadhi is the medicine for all ills. We have this deep knowledge, tested and tried and regenerated by communities like the ones who gather at the Real Truth About about Health conference. The anti-food nature of the industrial system is rooted both in the paradigm as well as in the tools on which the system is based. As far as the paradigm is concerned, it's a paradigm of warfare, of extermination. The roots of industrial agriculture, the chemicals that are used, the toxics that are used, all come from the cartel called IG Farben making chemicals for Hitler to kill people in the concentration camps. So it's a technology of extermination. And you might call it modern, but the fact that it's new doesn't make it good. Hitler was very modern in his time. IG Farben was creating new chemicals. They were very modern in their times. And the idea, I mean, right now they keep saying, oh, it's not good enough to have real food. We've got to have food from labs. It's where all the money of the world, where the billionaires are putting their money, where Silicon Valley wants to rush. And this is the moment to defend real food for real health. Given that we are living through a horrendous pandemic, and our government had said that it'd be over in 18 days, and it's gone worse over time. But when it started, I, of course, wanted to know how it started. And at that time, I wrote a piece, I wrote my blog on my flight back, rushing home to not be locked down outside India, to at least come home to be locked down. And this was March last year. And I wrote ecological reflections on the coronavirus. And I realized that our health is connected through biodiversity, and disease is connected through the destruction of biodiversity. And that's why a paradigm of extermination that destroys diversity is a disease-creating paradigm. We are one Earth family on one planet, healthy in our diversity and interconnectedness. The planet's health and our health is not separable. We can be linked worldwide through the spread of disease, like the current coronavirus. When we invade the homes of other species, manipulate the plants and the animals for commercial profits and greed, and spread monocultures. Or we can be connected through health and well-being for all, by protecting biodiversity of ecosystems and protecting the biodiversity integrity, self-organization of all living beings, including humans. New diseases are being created because a globalized, industrialized, inefficient food and agriculture model is invading into the ecological habitat of other species and manipulating animals and plants with no respect for their integrity or their health. The illusion of the earth and her beings as raw material to be exploited for profits is creating one world connected by disease. And now this whole year should have been a lesson and a wake-up call. The health emergency is not the only emergency the system is creating. It is waking us to the connectedness of multiple emergencies. The climate emergency, the extinction emergency of disappearance of species, the disease emergency, and with it, the hunger emergency, because they're not separate. A system of food production that is driven by profits and extraction and the use of poisons and fossil fuels cannot be linked to the processes. It is disembedded from the processes that maintain the earth systems that give us food. The evidence is so clear. The evidence is clear that the pockets of Ebola were always where deforestation had happened. In India, we had the Kirsner forest disease, and there'd been very detailed epidemiology. Kirsner, the monkey disease, wherever there was patches of deforestation, and the HIV and the Zika and all of these new pandemics have emerged from a limitless greed model of agribusiness. Now, a lot of people are still stuck with the myth that industrial agriculture is the solution to feeding the world. First of all, no one feeds the world. I think who feeds families? We feed communities. We feed our countries. Feeding the world is what the nutrition cycle does, not agribusiness, not the Monsantos. So the myth that was created when the chemicals from agriculture, from the concentration camps, were brought into agriculture by the group of I.G. Farben and their partners in America, the DuPonts and the Monsantos and the Rockefellers and the Standard Oils, they worked as one common interest of making money through the death of people. When they moved into agriculture, they redefined agriculture from being a self-organized, renewable system where living systems work together in cooperation and mutuality and the economics of giving, into an industrial system where the inputs were fossil fuels and chemicals derived from fossil fuels, and the output was commodities. And it's like our bodies were where all this was put through. Look at the input issue. If we did a truly honest calculation, and now having spent 4 decades on this, I have done so many studies. The industrial system actually is not an efficient system at all. It is very, very, very inefficient. It uses 10 units of energy as inputs to produce 1 unit of bad food as an output. This is a negative energy equation. If it wasn't subsidized with our tax money, it would collapse tomorrow. And that's why we must start becoming much, much more assertive about how tax money is used for which food system to subsidize the killing systems, the systems that are killing the biodiversity, the insects, the plants with chemicals like the glyphosates and the insecticides and the neonicotinoids, or systems that nourish life on Earth. Will we subsidize agribusiness, or will we support local farmers and local farmers' markets? These are choices we need to make. And because the myth that, oh, this is technology and it's none of your business, has been riding high since the Green Revolution was imposed on India. I shouldn't say introduced, it was imposed on India. I've written a whole book called The Violence of the Green Revolution. It's been published by Kentucky University Press, who've also published The Stolen Harvest. I wrote this book when I watched the violence emerge in 1984 in Punjab. I had been familiar with a Punjab that had been very peaceful and very prosperous, the richest state. Rich because it's the land of 5 rivers. Rich because it has amazing soils. Rich because it has hard-working farmers. Rich because a few hundred years ago, an amazing person called Guru Nanak basically gave teachings that good food and the giving of food is the highest duty of humanity on Earth. And that's why you will not be surprised that whether it is the pandemic in New York or today in India, where it's oxygen deficiency, or during the Syrian war or Iraq, no matter where you are in the world, a Gurudwara, a Sikh temple based on Guru Nanak's teaching, will organize food because they see the giving of food as the highest service, not rituals and not hate. You see, we've had the mutation of religion first into emptying it of content. I mean, just reflect a little bit that there is not a single religion that doesn't have food as sacrament. It's called prasad in India, langar in the Sikhism. The Christians have the bread of life. And again, we reduced it to a ritual. But even more importantly now, religion, which is supposed to bind us, it's about relating has now become a justification for creating hate and therefore keeping us divided from understanding what are the roots of disease and what are the solutions for real health. The issue of food as a commodity has not just created the false claim of efficiency, it has also created a false claim of productivity. We produce more food. First of all, no agribusiness, you don't produce food at all. Commodities are not food. They don't feed people. They might be raw material for the biofuel industry. They might be raw material for the animal feed industry. And if you think of the factory farming, 1,000 units of input to produce 1 unit of protein. And if you take all of this into the pretend solution of fake lab food, fake lab milk, it'll be even more, because at every step you're intensifying energy use. You're intensifying external energy use. All living systems have inner energy. And therefore, we talk of these as self-organized. More importantly, this energy is not just renewable. It actually reverses entropy. For me, it's very, very inspiring that some of the best people who really understood life were not the ones who were studying life. They were studying nature. So Schrödinger wrote a book, the quantum physicist. You might have heard of the Schrödinger cat. Because of uncertainty, neither dead nor alive. You don't know till you open the box. But Schrödinger wrote a little book, What is Life? And he concludes in trying to understand what is life, that life is that miracle with the reverses entropy. It is a negative entropy process. It is not a mechanical process. And it is now time to give up the mechanical idea of food production, the mechanical idea of our bodies, a mechanical idea of how we will bring health. The pseudo-productivity is located in a construct, a totally fake construct called yield. And we're always told we increase yield. But what does yield measure? Yield measures the commodity, and you could have destroyed a very, very rich farm with a lot of biodiversity and grown a monoculture. And then you shrunk the plant, which is what the Green Revolution was. Norman Borlaug got a Nobel Peace Prize for shrinking plants, just so they could take chemicals. Because tall plants know how to stand tall if they are fed organic matter. But when those tall plants, which are our native seeds, which are designed for food for the soil, organisms, food for animals, and food for human beings, so the straw is food for the soil and animals, and the grain was for us. We never tried to maximize grain at the cost of straw, because all of it was part of a food cycle. But when you apply synthetic fertilizers, which was the real objective, to sell more fertilizers after the war, the native plants lodge because fertilizer weakens the cellular wall of plants. So they lodge. So they say, chase the plant. They made dwarf plants with hard stalks. Then they told the farmers, burn it. They brought the combine harvesters to take the grain. Now, if you look at that plant, it is not producing more. If you look at that plant in an ecosystem, it's actually producing less. That has been my life's work, to show how when you take a biodiverse field and reduce it to one monoculture, and then you take the monoculture and reduce it to just grain that you extract, you're not growing more food. You're definitely not growing more food for the ecosystem. You're not growing more nutrition. So we shifted over these years. In 95, I got fed up. And I said, this is a wrong metric. The metric should be health per acre, not yield per acre, because the yield only measures how much of nutritionally empty toxic commodities are leaving the farm. And they don't even measure what is it going for. Is 90% of corn and soya growing in the United States going for food? No, it's going for animal feed and biofuel. And it doesn't measure what did it do to the ecosystem. It doesn't measure the quality of the food, what does it do to your body's ecosystem? But worse, it doesn't measure the state of the soil. It leaves the soil degraded. It doesn't measure the state of biodiversity. You're creating biodiversity deserts. You're pushing species to extinction. And so my life's work really since 84 has been to understand how nature works in living systems. I try to understand how it works in quantum systems, but it helped me to understand living systems because at the end of the day, the base of living systems is not mechanical systems, but quantum coherence at the highest level, from the molecule to the cell, to the organisms, to the ecosystem, to the planet as a whole. I had a very dear friend, two very dear friends, biologists from whom I learned a lot, not reductionist mechanistic biologists. One was May Wan Ho, who wrote a brilliant book. She used to interact with me because I'd done my quantum theory, and she'd bring me this book where she was trying to understand, the quanta in living systems. And she wrote a brilliant book called The Rainbow and the Worm. I don't know if it's available, but it is absolutely brilliant. Do read it. And another by an absolutely brilliant biologist, Brian Goodwin, who started the MSc honors in Schumacher College. Brian wrote a book, Why the Leopard Has Its Spots. Now, because, everything in the Darwinian thing was about survival and competition, etc. And basically, brilliant biologists showed that this is about development and evolution. It comes from within. It doesn't come from fear. It comes from the potential to evolve. So we have many, many, many ways of understanding how living systems work. And it's only the integrity of living systems and the integrity of relationships between living systems that gives us both food and health. So we shifted to measuring not yield per acre, but nutrition per acre, health per acre. And because I work with so many farmers, we've trained more than 1 million. We then work with them on participatory studies. How much has your field with 9 crops produced? How much has your farm with agroforestry and crops produced? And we did a study with 200 farms on the basis of measuring nutrition per acre and not yield per acre. Because the yield would only measure a monoculture. And maybe in the monoculture you went from, if you shifted the whole system from maize and beans and onion and garlic and some greens and some millets into a maize system, you increased your maize yields from 4 to 5. And meantime, the maize you grew lost its nutrition because native maize have much more nutrition. A lot of research is now showing that all native varieties have far more nutrition. I've just done a new blog called Reclaim the Seed, which has a lot of this detail of why native seeds, which were called low yielding in comparison to the fake high yield, are actually much more higher yielding in terms of nutrition. And weight is a Cartesian measure that's irrelevant to health. You don't, if weight was a measure of health, the obese people of the United States would be indicators of a very healthy society. But obesity and diabetes and complications from that is in fact an indicator of metabolic disorders because of bad food. So our research has shown, and we have a report called Health Per Acre. It's available on the Navdanya website. For those who are interested, please go to the navdanya.org website. And on this website, you will both see the courses we offer through the Earth University I've created, as well as this report, many reports, a new report we've just done on Earth democracy. We did it for Earth Day, connecting the rights of nature to the rights of Mother Earth. And the rights of Mother Earth to the human rights. And looking at all the separations that have brought us to this brink, including disease pandemics, but also the different ways we can overcome it. And because I've done this work now for so long, we've shown how you respect the seed, you will have more nutrition and food. You respect the soil, You will have more nutrition in food. You respect the food itself. You will have much more health. Let me share with you some absolutely brilliant gems from our ancient Vedas and our Upanishads. They are more relevant today than when they were written. The web of life is a food web. The cycle of life is a food cycle. For it is an anna, food. It is indeed that all beings are born. And it is from anna that they obtain the necessary sustenance for living. And having lived, it is into anna that they merge at the end. Do not look down on anna, because we are looking down on food. We think it can be, junk food. How could we even reach the stage as humanity that the richer a country, the more junk food it eats? The poorer a country, the more real food it eats. What kind of indicator of progress are we working with? Do not look down on food, on anna. That is the unviable discipline for the one who knows. Prana. What is the COVID crisis? Why are people dying for lack of oxygen? It's prana. Pranayam. Breathe in deep. Yeah. Prana, the winds of life, are indeed anna. And sharira, the body, is the partaker of anna. Sarir is secured in prana and prana is secured in sharira. They depend on each other. And then this is the web of life. All that is born of anna. Whatever exists is born of anna, and in the end merges into it. The waters is created, the soil is created, the climate is created by anna. What does it mean in contemporary scientific terms? That the cycle of life, what is the web of life? But the flow of the cycle of life. What maintains the cycle of life? The nutrition cycle. So I have called food the currency of life. And we could then stretch this to say real food is the currency of real health. And bad food is the currency of disease. We've done a manifesto on food and health, and my 36 years of research on agriculture have been brought together in a book that's available right now in India. It's called Biodiversity, Agroecology, Regenerative Organic Agriculture from Westville, and it will be getting published by Synergetic Press in the United States, I would think in spring next year. You can look out for it. But we assess the cost from WHO data. We know, here is food. They call them lifestyle diseases. I call them food style diseases. And we know the processes. The published literature is all there to show the processes through which industrial, toxic, poison-based food is giving us disease. Toxic cause cancer. Look at all the cases in America around the issue of glyphosate and glyphosate-induced cancer. Annually, 2.5 trillion. Diabetes, 2.5 trillion. Bad food, that's all it takes to give you diabetes. Endocrine disruption, the toxic, 549 billion. These are the costs. And the costs too are from WHO data. Antibiotic resistance infections, because we're feeding animals in factory farms so much antibiotics. Infertility, the younger generation, for us having a baby, easy. Younger generations, I know very, very few young women or young men who have fertility. Infertility is costing 3.6 billion. Obesity is 1.2 trillion. Birth defects, 22.9 billion. Neurodegenerative diseases, 2.4 trillion. Autism, 171 billion. If you just look at the CDC data, the graph for autism is growing like that. And the tragedy is the fake science keeps trying to blame it all on the genes, but genes aren't changing. So the percentage should stay the same. Why is the percentage growing? Because it's not about the genes. It's about the toxics in the environment and toxics in our food and the imbalance in our diet, because the stolen harvest that I wrote about way back was more about how the harvest of the sea and the land was being stolen. I would now add to it and say This is the stolen harvest from our food, where nutrition itself is being stolen from our food. And instead of nourishment, we are getting disease. Having spent all these decades on practicing biodiversity and ecological agriculture, and having evolved the indicator of health per acre and nutrition per acre, our work in India has shown that if all the land under cultivation was converted to biodiverse ecological agriculture, we could actually feed 2 times India's population. So the myth that you need chemicals and industrial farming to feed the world, the data just doesn't validate that. It's a very good propaganda statement. And that's the tragedy of our times, that propaganda has substituted science. Knowledge has been displaced by data. And data is merely the extraction of information into bits, and then having algorithms arrange those bits into some fake pattern, which does not reflect the pattern of society or the pattern of nature. Big data is not knowledge. Big data is not wisdom to decide what's good for your health or the health of the planet. That wisdom comes from full knowing beings taking the best from their societies, their ancestors, and from their bodies, because bodies are intelligent. You know what? We were just told they're dead matter. Nature out there is dead matter, our bodies are dead matter, and all you have to do is interchange. And transhumanism is really dreaming of not just the ultimate machine, but Ray Kurzweil, the guru of Silicon Valley, actually says we have to enhance ourselves and merge and become part of that which is superior to us, the machine. And the day humanity starts deciding that tools they have created, machines they have created, are superior to them, they've already lost the wisdom. And of course, then data mining and data manipulation and behavioral modification will be the substitute. I've written a book called Oneness versus 1%, which has been published by Chelsea Green. And in that, I've tried to solve the puzzle of how come billionaires became more powerful than elected governments? Because I watched him dictate terms to governments at the Paris summit. And he was just dictating terms to your president in America, to Biden, saying, all technologies won't do, and I have the new technologies. Well, Hitler had new technologies of extermination. Are you going to celebrate it because it was new? You have new technologies of geoengineering, of genetic engineering with gene editing and gene drives. And you have new technologies without knowing how to breed a seed, without knowing what a seed is, to push through machines the seeds you have stolen from our farmers and have genomic maps made. We know the colonizers came and took our lands and made maps. Colonization was about the invader making maps. Today's colonization is digital maps on life systems. And it's not that we don't have laws that respect all this. I worked for the Convention on Biological Diversity. I worked for my national laws to protect the sovereignty of the seed, the sovereignty of countries. And the only way these digital maps will be useful is by undercutting these regulations. And therefore, Bill Gates is financing on a very rapid rate the deregulation that we've put in place over the last few decades. He's also launched a year ago, at the peak of Corona, he was very busy. He was creating the new world. He launched a whole new program called Gates Ag One. Now, my life in the service of the earth has shown that every part of the earth is unique. Her biodiversity varies. Farming systems have evolved in partnership with our biodiversity. Food systems have evolved in partnership with that biodiversity. Our bodies have evolved in partnership with that biodiversity. And when you make a break with that biodiversity, and you now start to claim that you are going to re-engineer farming systems. No, earlier you re-engineered seeds into GMOs. Now you want to re-engineer landscapes at a go and have one agriculture across the world. And some of you might have noticed the new land grab that Gates has emerged as the biggest land owner of US. And land and food are the biggest investments after the 2008 subprime collapse. You know, the big billionaires know, land won't run away. Your securitization and your derivatives will evaporate, but the land will not, the earth will not. But even more importantly, because you have taken over mastery in a new way, you now want to say, I'm going to use land in ways that others will be forced into that kind of land use with digital agriculture and farming without farmers, and lab food without farms. Farms he wants to reduce to producers of raw material. Food is not wholesome food with everything we need in its integrity. Food for him is the lab stuff, and agriculture is producer of raw material. And he is signing up deals with the buyers. Monsanto is now buyer, Syngentas with the DuPont, on making even bigger farms to produce this raw material. Worse, I don't know how many of you followed the new language emerging as solutions to the emergencies we face. The language of half for nature. We are part of nature. A part doesn't decide for the whole. You get rid of. I'll get rid of you. I'll leave half for you. That means suicide. For others, it means genocide. Second, nature-based solutions. But nature is the solution if you allow ecological systems to work, if you allow healthy eating to work. Natural foods are the solution to ill health because they're matched to our gut microbiome. You have had most amazing lectures who have gone through this much more deeply than I can. What I bring to you is my lifetime in service of the earth as an ecologist, and more recently in terms of ecological agriculture and the protection of biodiversity. Our work is showing that health is a continuum from the soil to our bodies. And I told you about the myth of feeding the world. 80% of the food comes from small farms, because the more we intensify biodiversity, the more food we get. And small farms are able to do it because they have an ingredient of love and care. And large farms have very heavy doses of poisons and carelessness. So large farms only produce 20% of the food we eat. Small farms give us 80%, but small farms use only 25% of the land. So you can imagine how much more land we could leave for regeneration of biodiversity if we allowed agricultural regeneration on our farms as small farms. This is why we need small farmers. For me, small farmers are the health providers, not commodity providers. That's how we work with our farmers. You give health. You give health to the earth, you give health to yourself, and you give health to those who eat the food you have grown. Our work is showing two things in terms of the soil, that when you obey the law of the recycling, which is called the law of return, you give back to the earth in gratitude, you actually have more food. You know, people think if you give, you have less. But that's only the greedy mind that doesn't know. A mother knows the more she gives her baby, the happier the baby is, the happier she is. The soil, the more you give to the soil, the more the soil gives you. And I want to just share with you two figures from our research and our practice. You know, even climate change, which in my view is a metabolic disorder of the planet. You know, the planet manages her own climate. And just like we get the metabolic disorders like diabetes when we eat junk, the earth has a metabolic disorder when we shift from real energy, living energy, to junk energy or fossil fuels. It is a metabolic disorder. Think of it. But how can you repair it? Just like you repair the metabolic disorders of the health of our bodies. Heal the cycles. Give back. So when we give back organic matter, we worked with the top soil ecologist of India. And he did a study for us 10 years, and now he's done it for 20 years of comparing chemical systems with organic systems. And let me just share with you the data. Organic matter in chemical farms is down by 14%. Organic matter in organic farms is up by 99%. We think by adding synthetic nitrogen fertilizers, which is made by using 2 liters of diesel to produce 1 kilogram of nitrogen, and Bill Gates is promoting nitrogen fertilizers as a climate solution when nitrogen fertilizers emit a greenhouse gas, nitrous oxide, which is 300 times more damaging to the climate. And all the scientific studies are showing that the worst violation of the planetary boundaries, the boundaries of the earth, I'm sorry I don't do PowerPoints, but that is the planetary boundary graph made by the Stockholm Institute. What are the limits we have crossed? The red is the total danger zones. The green is the safe zone. The danger zone is species extinction. Your chemicals in agriculture don't just kill you with cancer, they push species to extinction. The big overshoot is nitrogen. And that's what the brilliant, richest man financing climate solutions and giving advice to your President Biden on climate solutions, he wants to make this rupture even worse. The reason your conference is so important is because money is taking us into a place where there will be no future for humanity. Extinction is predictable. But because they live in the illusion, we've always overcome. They're thinking, kill the earth, go to Mars. Mars has no life. There is no planet B. Except we know that while they create the illusion of going to Mars, they allow that to take over all of the lands of the indigenous people. I was talking about the phrases nature-based solution, and the other is half for nature and then zero, net zero. Net zero means I'll pollute, but I will control your farm so that you can be a carbon sink for me. It's called offsets in the climate language. But if I go through 2 other elements in our farming systems, so zinc is a very, very important trace element, 37% less, 38% less in the chemical soils, and 14% more in the organic soils. And manganese, 17% less, 14% more in our soils. So we are basically creating nutritionally empty commodities, which are generating super profits for agribusiness, technology, the Cargills of the world. And because the ones who sell the chemicals, the same IG Farman, are the ones who are big pharma, Bayer. Bayer is a drug industry. So big pharma, as poison creators, they create disease. As big pharma, they bring you the solution and get you deeper into debt and get your bodies. Look at the data on iatrogenesis, hospital and medicine-induced diseases. So when we add to the soil buildup of organic matter, the intensification of biodiversity, our data on nutrition per acre is showing that we have 106% more copper, 61% more magnesium, 243% more molybdenum, 64% more zinc, 72% all trace elements taken together compared to the chemical monocultures. Here is an option for us to grow food aligned with ecological laws, which are the laws of nature. And these laws, what I've learned over my 4 decades of study in the food system, the law of diversity. Monocultures is a violence against the law of nature. Nature never grows a monoculture plantation. The colonials did. They took Africans as slaves after having grabbed the land of the Native Americans. and turned that into a plantation economy. Or they took my people from India and then took them to the Caribbean islands, took them to South Africa, took them to Mauritius to turn them into indentured labor, because by then abolition didn't allow slavery. So monocultures are a residue of the plantation economy of colonialism. Diversity is the evolution and co-evolution with nature according to nature's laws. And diversity is health. Let me just share with you some, we knew it. In Ayurveda, we say you must eat 6 tastes every day, in every meal. And that's why, the Indian thali is so delicious, a bit of chutney for the sour, of course, always a sweet, the acidic, the salty, the bitter. The Westerners couldn't figure out why bitter. Well, we have sensors for eating bitter. That's why you love the Karela and the neem, the bitter gourd. So, someone I've come to know recently, Aaron Mayer, who works a lot on the gut microbiome and has written a book on the mind-gut connection. I know he's bringing out a film for Netflix on connection, that it's all about connection. And he writes, for decades, the mechanistic, militaristic disease model set the agenda for medical research. As long as you could fix the affected mechanical part, we thought the problem would be solved. There was no need to understand its ultimate cause. We were just beginning to realize that the gut, the microbes living in it, the gut microbiota, constitute one of the major components of these regulatory systems and the signaling molecules that they produce from their vast number of genes. So I look at all these people who want to declare war against the microbe, but that's not just a war against the planet, because most beings on this planet are microbes, but it's a war against us. We are 90% microbes. Our gut has 100 trillion microbes who have the most amazing intelligence. And our gut has sensors, and those sensors need different foods. That's why a diet rich in different foods is necessary for our gut to work. The gut is now being called the second brain. More neurological activity is going on in the brain, in our gut, than in this brain. And in fact, that brain is making this one run. That's why the whole issue of neurodegenerative diseases with the increase in bad diets, which is an assault on our gut microbiome. And this is shifting our perception of not just who we are. We have to stop thinking of ourselves in anthropocentric terms of being superior and masters of other species who are just objects to be manipulated. But we realize we are interbeings. 90% of us is other beings, and they ain't us and give us help. This idea, first in the concentration camps, that some humans are inferior and we will only have purity of race if they're exterminated, that's what guided Hitler's thinking. And then that thinking went when it was introduced to agriculture, instead of celebrating the diversity of insects. Insects were made the enemy, wipe out each of them. And if you look at the advertisements of the pesticide industry, every insect is made an enemy for extermination. But first of all, the insects have an amazing intelligence to create a web of food, and they have a best predator balance. We have a lot of insects on our Navdanya farm, but no pests. Because in that web of life, no particular insect becomes dominant. It's a monoculture that creates a feast for some insects who then become pests. Pests are a creation of industrial agriculture. Nature does not create pests. Weeds are a creation of industrial agriculture. Nature does not give us weeds. Good farming creates biodiversity, not weeds. Good farming creates insect diversity, not weeds. And when your insect diversity, monocultures first create certain insects which become too high in their numbers, and then they start to become damaging. And then you spray poisons, and you think you're going to control them. But instead of controlling them, you create super pests because you forget that the insect is intelligent and will evolve resistance. So you create resistant pests. Then you think, oh my gosh, but now I can do genetic engineering, I'll change the plant. And you think by spraying Roundup on genetically engineered crops, you'd beat the weeds. Now the weeds become super weeds because they're intelligent and they know how to evolve to protect themselves. So this mechanistic game of control and mastery has failed again and again and again. And yet it is being put on fast forward as a solution to the emergencies, the climate emergency, the extinction emergency, the pandemic emergency, the health emergency that we are facing because of that system. As Einstein had said, you cannot solve a problem with the same mindset that caused it. You cannot solve the problem of the climate's health disorder through the same mindset of greed and fossil fuels and globalization. You cannot solve the health disorders of our bodies by continuing to treat health as an external input, either a drug that you buy or a vaccine, because health is being whole. Being whole is the self-organization. So for the earth to be whole, we have to remove the pressures of the fossil fuel system and our resource demands so that the earth can be whole again. I have worked in enough ecosystems to know if you get that pressure off, the biodiversity comes back. On our farm, I began with a simple commitment. I'm going to save seeds. I'm not going to let monopolies of Monsanto own the seed. I'm not going to let every seed become a GMO. So we started saving seeds. We built 150 community seed banks in India. And today I want to celebrate with you International Seed Day. We named it International Seed Day because I don't know how many of you even remember the Iraq War. It seems so far away. But the Iraq War, everyone thought it was about oil only. No, it was about seeds too. So the Iraqis came to me for help. And you will have seen images of the tortures in Abu Ghraib, which was made the prison. Abu Ghraib was their seed bank. And the name Abu Ghraib came from one of their ancient wheat varieties, whose name was Abu Ghraib. So we take the best varieties from the Fertile Crescent, where agriculture originated, and we turn this gene bank into a prison for torture. You might remember, they were giving electric shocks, and they put hoods on the prisoners. This was when absolutely, it was on the top story at that time. But around that time, the administrator for Iraq was someone called Bremer. And Bremer passed an Iraqi Order 81, making it illegal for Iraqi farmers to have their own seed and requiring that they use Monsanto seeds. That's why they reached out to me desperately. And we decided, I helped them with understanding laws and also understanding that saving seed is the highest duty. And if you have to disobey a law, that's your duty. That's why I call it Satyagraha, following Gandhi, the force of truth. For me, the force of truth of the seed means a law that says you can't save seeds has to be disobeyed. A law that says you can't exchange seed has to be disobeyed, because sharing and saving seed is the highest moral duty on earth. So because Bremer had passed this order on 26th of April, we decided we're going to celebrate World Seed Day, International Seed Day on the 26th of April. I'm very happy I'm giving this talk to you on this day, because what we are talking about is protecting the seeds of health, both literally, materially, but also in our minds. Because the seeds of death have acquired so much power that unless each of us has the awareness, the consciousness, the resilience, and collectively we move towards a system that creates health by creating real food, we will not be able to stop. This experiment, we have a whole process on crimes against nature. It's called ecocide. And what Hitler did in his concentration camps is genocide, as is the genocide of indigenous people and First Nations, or the Aboriginal people, or my people when they were pushed to famine. These are all genocides, harming people deliberately. What we are seeing before us is ecocide and genocide, which has evolved in the last 500 years, now being put on fast forward, and everyone, the government's being told you can't regulate us. People being sold, oh my gosh, if you dare speak truth about health, we're going to label you as a conspirator. And it's very interesting that, years ago, we evolved a national movement for understanding indigenous science, which was very, very sophisticated. It gave us Ayurveda, it gave us agroecology. And a young engineer decided she was not going to do engineering, she'd study Ayurveda. She became a leading Ayurvedic practitioner in all these years. She runs an Ayurvedic hospital. She has treated COVID patients. And she was asked to give a talk. And YouTube removed it. So it goes against the community roots. Since when did YouTube become the community of health practitioners? I think all of you need to look much, much more closely at what is happening with the digital giants, because they have not just entered health in a full way, but they're entering our bodies. I did, with another Ayurvedic doctor, a civilizational dialogue, looking at 3 patterns that had come up very, very quickly in the early days of the corona. One was the 14 patents of Mr. Gates and Microsoft and Silicon Valley on the Impossible Burger. But along with it, another claim to make, called biomilk, and there's patent application for it, and Gates has funded it. And this is fake breast milk made in labs. And this is being offered as a climate solution. So what we've done, and this little booklet is available on, sadly, on Amazon. Sadly, on Amazon, because, during the lockdown, there was no way of printing, distributing anything. So they did a digital copy, and it's available as a Kindle on, they worked something out, but I didn't publish it. My colleagues in Kerala did it. The second patent, is related to something I work with a lot. I work a lot with women on growing nutritious food, saving the seed of nutritious food, and overcoming things like anemia, which have affected 75% Indian women, because through monocultures of cereals, through spraying of Roundup, we have wiped out all the greens. We have wiped out the diversity that gives us vitamin A or iron. Now, the solution to anemia is just grow lots and lots of iron-rich plants, the Sesbania, so many plants we have, the Bathua, the Sahajan, Moringa, so rich in iron. And instead of bringing biodiversity back to our lands and our farms and our gardens, Google 5 years ago started a life sciences division. And one of the patents for this life sciences division is a patent for introducing nanoparticles in the blood. Now, I know enough about this field to know that there is no science assessment and no regulation of the impact of any particle that's 10 to the power minus 9. It'll go through any membrane of the body. And there is no science to assess the harm. And the head of this of the Google Life Sciences division, which they call it, I don't know what they call the division, but he basically goes on to say, we have to defeat Mother Nature. Well, the only way we're going to have health for the planet and our health is being aligned with Mother Nature, not defeating her. Every attempt to defeat Mother Nature has led to more ecological crisis and deeper health crisis. And of course, a deeper inequality crisis and a deeper poverty crisis. And finally, of course, is a patent by Microsoft. So the nanoparticles, the Global Life Sciences division is called Verily. And when the head, and Conrad was asked, why do you call it Verily, which means truly? He says, it's only through our truth, not the truth of nature, our truth, we're going to defeat Mother Nature. This patent, Google Life Sciences, the number is WO2010034319A1, world patent. And then there's another world patent of Microsoft. And this patent basically is for humans as users of machines. The patent is 060606 for human body activity associated with a task provided to a user. We are human beings have been reduced to users. We are not autonomous, conscious, thinking beings, part of a conscious universe. We are users. And a task provided to us, used in a mining process. The process is mining our data for a cryptocurrency system. Basically, what this patent is saying, we'll mine the bodily activity and brain activity of human beings through machines, all this smartware. And sadly, the richer the people, the more they're running into the slavery, new smartware, new altered realities. They're just allowing their data to be mined. And our bodies are being reduced to new raw material. And then this mined data is processed through algorithms, and no algorithm is anything more than a machine learning that someone put together on the basis of all of their biases, their women bias, their misogyny, their racism, all those assumptions go into the algorithms. And then this algorithm, on the basis of our activities, is going to allocate us our value. And if you notice, my country was the first where they made cash illegal. 2016, digitalization was forced on the country. 8 o'clock in the evening announced midnight, cash was illegal, the big notes. And 70% of the economy crashed. This digitalization is now going all over the world, and there's a war on cash. They call it war on cash, because cash is merely a medium of exchange. It has no value in itself. It's just a promise. You read the dollar note, it says, I promise to pay the bearer. When it's digital, even a credit card, you're giving rents to the global financial system. But when it's cryptocurrency in the hands of algorithms, in the hands of big tech, they will do what is happening in China. Create social credit system to decide a new caste system. And you might have also followed that while all this has been happening, the founder of the World Economic Forum did a book called The Great Reset on how to deal with the COVID crisis. And everything we're seeing unfold is part of that Great Reset. But an element of that Great Reset is you will own nothing. Now, I'm a believer in the commons, and it would be so good if all land was a commons, if all seed was a commons, if food was a commons, if health was a commons, so that we had strong public health systems, strong community health system, deep knowledge about being healthy. But when Carl Schwab says, you will own nothing, he's saying we'll own it all. That's why you have Gates, not just owning the seed, wanting to own our food. One, of course, controls the health, and now owning land. This, if ever there was a time for humanity to wake up, now is the time. We have to see, you know, when I heard the Monsantos talk about patenting seed, and I said, my God, this is like the slavery of life. You know, slavery was wrong when humans were treated as property. But when life itself, which is not being invented by these guys, is treated as intellectual property, this is bioimperialism. It's ownership of life. It is slavery over life. And I said, we have to emancipate life. And that's what my life's work has been since 1987, when I first heard them. And now, if you know, that seems so mild compared to what we are hearing from the Googles and the Microsofts and the Zuckerbergs and the Elon Musks. And they are really running this beautiful planet as their property to make more money and more money and more money with ignorance, arrogance, and fear. It is time to protect the earth from them, to protect our health from them, to protect our democracy from them. And I know you're a community who has that commitment. Thank you.
Wow. How profoundly alarming. And I don't know how to put into words how grateful we all are for the stand you've made for all of us and for the planet and Mother Earth. So thank you, Vandana. As you can all see on the screen, go visit Navdanya.org to learn more about how you can become a part of this amazing mission. If it's okay with you, we'd love to take some questions and do a Q&A with you.
Yes, sure. Sure, man. Yes.
Thank you. And so with that, I can see some people already know the drill, but let's make sure everybody knows what we're doing here is we're only able to take questions live. We can't take them from the chat box. So if you would, we ask you to raise your hand. We'll pick selected hands in the order in which they've come in. And then we'll go ahead and ask each person individually to unmute as you have a question. We ask you to keep your questions brief and direct for Vandana Shiva. And if you don't know how, on the bottom of your Zoom screen, there's little tabs, tool tabs, and one of them is called reactions. If you click on your reactions tab, you will see a little thing that says raise hand, and you click on that, and that's how we get your hand raised. For some people, it might not be in the reactions tab. It might be only on the participants tab, but you should be able to find it somewhere there. So we look forward to your questions. And with that said, Vandana will jump in with, I see some hands raised already, so we'll get going. And so our first question is from somebody with the initials AM. So AM, if you'd go ahead and unmute yourself, please. Thank you so much.
Oh, hi. I just wondered why Bill Gates is so anti-organic.
Because he's put his investments into fake food. You know, just like if Monsanto had put all its investment in GMOs and patenting, of course it was going to try and criminalize seed saving, and which is why I started seed saving. So, you know, what Monsanto was in the late 80s and early 90s, Bill Gates is today. But except that Monsanto was selling toxics, had sold Agent Orange, selling Roundup, but also pushing GMOs. Gates wants every bit of our lives, our health, our food, our land, our minds, our knowledge, our governments, our democracies. So of course he won't want organic, which gives freedom for small farmers to grow food without chemicals and without GMO seeds.
Thank you. And up next, we have Catherine. Catherine, if you'd go ahead and unmute yourself, please, for Vandana Shiva.
Hi, Vandana Shiva. I can't even believe I'm getting to talk to you. I'm so happy. I refer to you, listen to you as much as possible. I'm a 65-year-old American that got to go to India in the early 80s on a spiritual pilgrimage with a shaved head. And I'm so angry. I'm so afraid. Sometimes I feel like I'm living in a good way and I'm contributing. Sometimes I'm just, you know, all these emotions. How do you deal with that to be so effective?
Well, you know, of course, I feel outrage. But I don't allow the outrage to turn into dissipative anger or into fear. Yeah. And I'm grateful to have been born to parents who encouraged me to be fearless. Yeah. Is as long as you live with your conscience, let your conscience be your compass. And there's nothing to be afraid of. And I've learned watching them and through my lifetime that your conscience has to be your compass, and don't allow your energies to be dissipated. Figure out what's going wrong and then turn that outrage into creative resistance. So when I was outraged with the patenting of seed, my creative resistance was, I'll save the seed, and where I can work with laws, which we did. There was a time where, we could make international laws and national laws, and we did it. And there are times where that closes because the gates are running our government. At that point, you do what you can with community. There are different times where different levels of governance have more openings. And, I'll just cite you two little things. One, it's in the cracks that light comes in. And two, you see, they can keep putting concrete and then the grass comes out. So we have to be the light that comes through the cracks. We have to be the grass that bursts past the concrete.
Thank you, Vandana. And up next, we have Rachel. Rachel, if you'd go ahead and please unmute yourself.
Hello. Nice listening to that. Never heard you before, but I'm so happy I tuned in. Could you tell me your thoughts on the vaccine and also sugar alternatives?
Well, I don't think I got the full question, but because I worked on living systems after my work on quantum theory, living systems are interactive systems. Right? Living systems help each other. And all living systems have immunity and resilience. So if I feed a soil organic, the plant is more resilient to pests. If I use native seeds, they'll never be attacked by pests. So native seeds never get attacked by pests. They're resilient. Resilience and immunity go hand in hand. But these are the inner self-organized complex systems of all living organisms. So chemical agriculture was, there's no fertility in the soil because they declare the soil dead. Fertility comes from the nitrogen factories that originally made explosives for Hitler. So they turned it into an external input system. Same system then redefined our bodies and our health, said health is not about being whole and having our immunity, it is about an external input system. Originally, it was drugs patented, and now it is vaccines patented. And you're watching the vaccine wars grow every second day. And just, I'll leave you with two facts. I'm not a doctor. My sister is. She knows much, much more about all of this. And she, in fact, had sued with a group of doctors in India the experiments financed by Bill Gates that had led to the death of children in I think 2 cases of vaccination in just in the clinical trial stage. So just 2 sentences. One, Gates has said, and you can Google for this, vaccines is my smartest investment. For $1, I make $200. And yet I make $20. For one, my $1 becomes 20. And we call him a philanthropist who's giving. Yeah. If someone else got $20, we could call it philanthropy. But if Gates is getting richer by $20, and the second is a lot of new writings on how he is becoming a block to any distribution because he is financing all the patents. See, all of these companies he's created, so many of the companies are overnight companies. And he's financed them. And he's financing the IPRs, and he owns the IPRs. And he changed the whole system of WHO, which was about fairness and equity, into what he calls accelerator. I talked about Gates Ag 1, accelerator. And he says, time is the enemy, time is the enemy, time is the enemy. I have the right to test anything on anyone in any part of the world. And I have the right to pretend I'm doing it for philanthropy.
Thank you for that, Vandana. Up next, we have Joel. Joel, if you'd go ahead and unmute yourself, please.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Dr. Shiva, it was a privilege for me through my teacher's lens to meet you in March 9th of 2015 here in St. Petersburg, Florida. You gave a wonderful talk and I have your book, Making Peace with the Earth. It is a magic moment to have you personally to discuss this issue. You talked about climate change being a metabolic disorder. And it is through my lens of teaching for 32 years that we need trees for the planet to breathe, for our Mother Earth to breathe, new growth forests. Could you speak to this need and this issue?
Yeah, so I mentioned, the law of return, and Albert Howard, who was sent to India by the British in 1905 as the imperial botanist. They didn't have a discipline called agriculture then, but there was an empire and botany was being used to expand the empire. And he was sent to India to improve Indian agriculture, to provide more raw material, the indigo, the cotton, whatever they wanted. And he arrived, in the place where the indigo capital was of the world. And Gandhi's first civil disobedience back in India, his first civil disobedience was in South Africa against the racist laws. But back in India, the first civil disobedience was against the growing of indigo. But that is where in 1905, 10 years before Gandhi, Howard had been sent to create an agriculture university. And he says, I saw the soils were fertile. I found no pests in the fields. I decided to make the insect and the peasant my professors and study good farming. And he wrote a book called The Agricultural Testament, which is available in the United States from Rodale Press, an agricultural testament. So it's really what he learned from Indian peasants. But what were Indian peasants doing? Practicing what we have learned from our deep knowing of how nature works, what good health is. He recognized that the Indian farms were like forests. There's a state of Kerala which has grown spices in thousands of years. And it's like a forest. The spice gardens are cultivated forests. So farms and forests are not opposite, it's a continuum. We have the richest agroforestry. I'm working a lot with our indigenous community to not cut their trees. And we have a lovely festival called Raksha Bandhan. Raksha means protection. We usually sisters tie to brothers. And now we've started tying it to palm trees. So don't let a single tree be cut. Now, so every leaf absorbs carbon dioxide, the sunshine and photosynthesis is what converts this into the oxygen we breathe and the carbohydrates we eat. This is the magic of life. So it's not just the forest, but even on farms, the density of the green leaf, which is the biodiversity density, which I talked about in terms of intensifying biodiversity and therefore increasing nutrition and health per acre. So, whatever solves the climate problem is also solving the health problem. When we grow monocultures with huge amounts of chemicals and fossil fuels, like the monocultures of the US, actually agriculture starts to become a net emitter. And 50% of the greenhouse gases are from a food and agriculture system that is based on invading forests, monocultures and farms, packaging, processing, long distance shipping, and waste. 50% of the emissions come from there. But sadly now, forests too are being converted into toxic farming. A lot of people were very concerned with the fires in California. But I have watched in California how they spray Roundup. But when you kill Roundup, when you kill the plants, you are desiccating the soil. When you're desiccating the soil, you're making the forest already tinder. Yeah. So Roundup kills all living systems, above soil and below soil. More importantly, in 1981, I did a big study. I had learned my ecology from my sisters in the mountains who did the Chipko movement. They came out and hugged the trees and said, we will not let our trees be cut. And they protected the native forests against the monoculture pine plantations. In 1981, I did a study when I was in Bangalore on eucalyptus. And the World Bank was pushing eucalyptus as social forestry, as phrase we had created in the Chipko movement. We did the study and we found that it kills the soil, kills the water, kills the food around, because the roots in dry lands go 30 feet and it competes with crops. So what I would say, it's not that farms can't be like forests. It's not that biodiverse rich farms are not solutions to climate change. And it is not that any old plantation is a forest. Plantations are not forests. We've got to allow biodiversity to regenerate in our forests and on our farms.
Thank you for that, Vandana. And up next, we have Zen. Zen, if you could go ahead and unmute your audio. Thank you.
Hi, Dr. Vandana Shiva. It's so good to see you again. I'm Zen from Moms Across America. And we've been working on trying to get glyphosate banned for a long time. And you mentioned glyphosate. I have two questions. One, do you know if the areas in India where they're particularly hit by COVID are agriculture areas where glyphosate was sprayed that may be weakening the immune systems, killing off the beneficial gut bacteria? And two, I'm sure you're aware of the recent glyphosate study that showed that 94% of the bees were killed when Roundup was sprayed on them, and 96% of the bees were killed when it was Roundup without glyphosate, showing that it's not just glyphosate, it's the co-formulants, which have never been approved, right, by our EPA. The final formulation's never been approved. So my question is, how can the global community accept such wide spraying of an herbicide that hasn't been declared a pesticide? It wasn't said when it was used that it also kills bees. Is there anything we can do as a global community to stop that and to get it off the market?
So, a few years ago, I think it was 2017, with the communities I work with and a community in the Alps, in the village called Mars, where they banned pesticides for a while, where apple orchards are the biggest reason for spraying, and the state of Sikkim, which declared a whole region, it's like the state of Maine going organic, we started a poison-free campaign. So that's the only way to be able to deal with this whole class of poisons that have no place in agriculture. And of course, this is not an either-or solution. It's not the case that when we go for all the poisons to build bigger awareness of how to grow healthy food, we don't go after particular chemicals which are causing particular harm. We needed those cases, cancer cases, we need them. We need particular governments like Mexico. European governments tried and they were cheated and became 5 years, and they're trying to again bring it down to 3 years. But the pressure shouldn't come off anywhere. But local councils in France started to declare themselves as glyphosate-free regions. And then, of course, the mafia came down on them and they just won cases. The mayors have won cases. So we have a right and a duty to protect our people from the harm these things cause. When you asked about the COVID, tragically, the first round of COVID was all imported. It all came on planes. It's a luxury traveler. Came on planes. And then when that first bit was over and, we calmed it all down, this round is in the big cities more. And even when it goes to villages, it gets carried from the cities. So it is a globalized, it's caused by the globalization of agriculture and invasion into forests, and it spreads through globalization. So it is a disease of globalization.
Thank you, Vandana. Up next, we have Aiden. Aiden, if you'd go ahead and unmute yourself. Thank you. Hi, Aiden.
Hello. My name is Aiden, and I'm a youth activist, and I'm a climate activist, and I also follow your work. I just got your book. I really am inspired by all that you're doing to fight the GMOs and Monsanto and everything like that. I'm also concerned that some of the climate activists around me aren't really aware of how much Bill Gates is trying to impose kind of a global oligarchy, sort of, and I'm worried that some of them think he's a great philanthropist, and that I feel like the billionaires are kind of taking over the climate movement, and I wondered how we can not allow that to happen. I believe in holistic health, and sometimes, like you said, sometimes YouTube censors that, and sometimes even some of my friends don't agree with it. So I was wondering how I can deal with it.
Ethan, so I'm so glad you believe in holistic health. And for me, climate activism is seeing that the holistic health of the planet has to be brought back. That's why I talk about climate action as earth care, because that's where the shift happens. You know, when it's about the new technological fix, the billionaires always have more money to offer the next more costly fix. And for this, I would request you to read on our Navdanya international website. The earlier website was navdanya.org, my work in India. But we also have a Navdanya International, where there are 2 reports that you can read and share with your friends in the climate movement. First is Gates to a Global Empire. Last year, I realized, my God, you know, not just health, not just WHO, FAO, he's stolen the Food and Agriculture Summit and taken it to New York to be headed by a person he appoints. And it's all about technological fixes. It is not about food anymore. It's not about the right to food. It's not about the right to healthy food. It's about selling fake food. Yeah. So read the Gates to a Global Empire. It has the Impossible Burger. It has geoengineering. You know, geoengineering is one very dangerous solution, pseudo solution. And Gates is the biggest financier of this. So Gates to a Global Empire is one report. And the second more specific one is fake solutions to climate change. And these are all techno fixes that Gates has offered. And from methods of agriculture that cause climate change, you know, he's done this book, and of course he can sell in billions. But I've had to work since the days of my early days on fertilizers that they came from Hitler's labs. Yeah. And then times they used to say, oh, we'll grow food from air. Yeah. Same method made explosives, same method made this white salt. And if you remember, every fertilizer explosion, whether intentional, like the fertilizer bomb in Oklahoma, in Oslo, in New Delhi, in the High Court, or all the fertilizer bombs in Afghanistan, are intentional use of fertilizer explosive. But Beirut last year lost 200 lives because fertilizer kept in a warehouse exploded. That's what it's supposed to be. And it is 300 times more damaging to the metabolism of the planet. And not only that, it runs off into the oceans and is creating dead zones. And the oceans are a very important absorber. And when the zones are dead and there's no life for absorption, you're going to have even more buildup of climate change. Soils are dying because I gave the figures of how soils are dying because of nitrogen fertilizer. Now here is really selling the problem as the solution. It's in his book. I'm not claiming this. I'm not saying he said this. I'm saying he is saying this. And this chapter, you know, for me, this chapter is very telling. We are not machines. Plants are not things. This chapter on agriculture, where he's offering fake solutions, he calls it How We Grow Things. Mr. Gates, things don't grow. Life grows, plants grow, children grow, the soil organisms grow. This is the old, obsolete, 400-year-old mastery paradigm to conquer the earth. The mechanistic paradigm denying life and its processes. It is so obsolete, and the fact that it's married now, as it was then, to big money. You know, Bacon, called the father of modern science, was the Chancellor of England. Yeah? It's so money and fake knowledge, pretending to be true knowledge, criminalizing real knowledge, has been there since the beginning of this system. True knowledge evolves in an embodied way, in a relational way, in a responsible way. So the fact that they have big money is not new. It's not new at all. Slavery, colonization was all based, it's the same pattern. So just because the size and the zeros add up much more, don't get worried about the zeros. Think of the fact that they are human beings. They should be held accountable. Your generation in the climate movement has first to learn the earth systems, learn living systems, learn what you're doing, holistic health, and bring that learning of living systems to climate solutions. So I say earth care is the true climate solution. More war on earth will create more climate havoc and more other havoc.
Thank you, Vandana. Up next, we have Stephanie. Stephanie, if you can go ahead and unmute yourself, please, for Vandana Shiva. Stephanie, not sure if you're able to hit that unmute button. Oh, you know what? I think I need to ask you to unmute. I'm sorry. Go ahead and try that now, Stephanie. Hi, Stephanie.
Hi, how are you?
Great.
Hi, Vandana. I'm so happy to be here today. I've been following you since I learned about you from Robert Kennedy. Thank you so much for all of your unbelievably courageous and enlightening work. I firsthand understand the glyphosate issue, and I've been an avid nutrition and health person trying to raise my family healthy. My son had glyphosate attached to one of his reproductive genes, which had to be ridded. My doctor had to give several IVs to get this out of his system. So I've tried locally to go to my school and change the food in the school. And I try to educate my friends about Bill Gates and send them your lectures. And I have to say, it's not easy to convince people. People are not, they don't believe that Bill Gates is doing what he's doing. They think most people, educated people, believe he's a philanthropist. And so my question to you really is, how can I begin to truly make a difference in my small community? How do I get this whole message across where people are going to believe me, where we can make changes? Maybe we can, convince schools to have gardens, which they resist. It's so hard to get through the system and actually make a difference. And for years of trying, it's not been easy. So how would you suggest I start?
Well, start by not trying to convince those who don't want to be convinced. Sadly, those who've been groomed longest in the fragmented mind of separation and the individualism, because the individualism got them privilege and an atomistic idea of the world, they are the ones who are most vulnerable to the propaganda machine, because the propaganda machine is feeding those illusions of separation, of atomization, of you are an individual. What we need to nourish are ideas of non-separation, of interconnectedness, of community. So look for anyone who will join hands with you to create a garden. Now, I could have spent all my life exhausting myself, trying to convince people what was wrong with the Green Revolution. I decided to go to the marginal and small peasant who was already feeling the pinch and say, we can do it differently, and work with them to do it differently. So don't work with the privileged believers of propaganda. Work with those who, through their life experience, have been excluded from the system of privilege and are looking for a way that they can have food and health.
Thank you, Vandana. Up next, we have Julie. Julie, if you would go ahead and unmute yourself. Thank you.
Thank you. Vandana, what a blessing to speak with you. We have a worldwide problem with our children's brain development. The world needs our children to be able to learn and become productive citizens, but from my brain-based research on preschool academic readiness, we've identified delayed development of the brain of our children. And this delayed development does not prepare a child to learn to read, as the two eyes cannot converge to see one image at the reading distance. So they drop out of school. They become juvenile delinquents. We have we have prison problems. This affects the male brain 9 out of 10 times more in our learning population. But we need our children to be able to learn to read and learn from reading to become strong citizens, because everything we're doing, we still need to pass on to our children. These delays start in the womb, is what I found out. And womb ecology actually equals world ecology. We must protect what I call the first water, which is the amniotic fluid. And you're talking about helping children. And helping women understand this, because these chemicals are passing through the placenta. So thank you for working with women, and we need to educate them that we have to protect our children's brain development starting in the womb with good food and a healthy environment. So thank you, and whatever you'd like to add to that so we can make the world a better place and a literate world.
You're so right that, all life begins in the seed, including human life, the seed in the womb of the mother. And then in that relationship, in that semiotic relationship, is the nourishing. And just as like the gut is being attacked by these poisons, the womb is being attacked, and the baby in the womb is being attacked. And its entire development is being affected, as you study and you know. So we do need, I say, like for the seed issue, I said it earlier, we have to see this as a new slavery. And we have to have a new abolition movement. The abolition has to be the abolition of poisons in. So I think the other thing, besides what you know, is how frankly, if you look at part of how the COVID has been handled, is everything is a fragmented learning, a fragmented communication through these digital systems. And, I worry about, you talked about children being affected by poisons and their learning abilities being crippled. But even the healthy children who are not being able to basically learn fully, we are literally creating a world that will not be able to know and think fully. It is stealing our minds and our brains, and minds and brains of future generation. That's why I say this has to be inspired by the abolition movement, except that then the slaves in America were Black. Now the slave is every child, every life form, every human being, except the billionaires and those who are in their 1% economy.
Thank you for that.
We are being enslaved. We are being enslaved.
Thank you, Vandana. Up next, we have Rita. Rita, if you'd go ahead and unmute yourself, please.
Powerful insight, Dr. Shiva. And I'm so thankful for Steve for introducing us through the real truth about health in Long Island. Several years ago, we met. A question for you is that how are farmers affected in India during this COVID-19 situation?
Well, you know, the farmers are actually coming out much healthier than the people in the cities. But because during COVID, those who want higher control are using the emergency to pass laws that would take more resources to the corporations and leave less for the earth and less for the producers and less for the workers and less for the farmers. We've now had about 4 months of farmers' protests. And interestingly, you know, they're all sitting outside Delhi, and you don't hear of these as COVID centers. But, you know, they're there, they lived through the winter, through hailstorms. They're now living through the heat at 48 degrees. Farmers of India have played historically a very important role and are continuing to play an important role and are not either the worst victims or the spreaders.
Thank you, Vandana. Up next, we have Michelle. Michelle, if you can go ahead and unmute yourself. Thank you.
Hi, Dr. Shiva. Thank you so much for everything that you're sharing with us. And I've been following you for a number of years. I'm involved in the holistic nutrition industry, but I'm also involved in the tea industry. And when I purchase, I try to focus as much as possible on small farmers and don't purchase through the colonial system. But what worries me every time I listen to you talk about the larger scope of agriculture globally, the soil degradation, what role does tea agriculture play in the broader scheme of things?
Well, you know, the two parts of India where tea is grown is the northeast and a bit in the Nilgiris. Now, this was totally colonial, you know, because I've worked so long in this. They used to have to tie iron balls with chains to be able to keep the people, because these were all forests that were cut, but they were very big malarial tracts. And so no one wanted to work there. And this was forced labor from the very beginning. But yes, we've had this long period of this as a plantation crop, but that doesn't mean that today those who are in the tea economy should be deprived of their livelihood. We have to now find ways to heal both socially the exploited workers in the tea gardens, as well as the method of farming, plantation of tea. And I'm very happy that we helped convert many tea gardens in Arunachal. And the interesting thing was, by shifting to organic estates, their incomes actually doubled, because now it wasn't about how much do you produce in terms of yield, but how much is the quality of your tea, and their quality was much higher. So we've got to shift from this extractive measure of yield and quantity maximization, which is also an extraction from workers, because the system of exploitation extracts from the earth and it extracts from the workers to get a bigger share to the corporation, the trade, whoever is exploiting. What we in Navdanya have built is economies of care, economies of sharing. And it is possible to give back more to the earth because she'll give you more. It is possible to give back more to those who work and produce, because then we have societies that are able to grow and produce what we need.
Thank you, Vandana. And up next, we have Suzanne. Suzanne, if you go ahead and unmute yourself, please.
Okay, I am here. Thank you so much. It's so wonderful to be here. Thank you, Dr. Shiva Ji. I would like to please ask, I'm very much focused on how we can kind of heal ourselves to heal the world around us. And you had mentioned, you know, separation consciousness is what is adding to this great divide. What are some ways that you feel that we can, you know, take our own control back within our own healing, you know, ourselves, basically at the most cellular level, to heal ourselves in a way that we can contribute the best of ourselves back to the world?
First is by knowing that we are not separate, that the health of our cells is shaped by the soil and the biodiversity. Yeah? And so we are related to the earth. The second is no part of our body is separate from any other part. And therefore, all holistic healing is about the whole. Now, Cartesian thought made holistic look ugly and bad, made organic look ugly and bad. The word organic means the science of living systems. Holistic means to see the whole, because no whole is only its parts. It is more than its parts, because the parts in relationship make something much bigger than what the parts alone would be. This is the lesson of quantum theory. This is the lesson of ecology. This is the lesson of interconnectedness. So the alternative to separation as a way of thinking is interconnectedness as a way of thinking.
Thank you, Vandana. And now we have Johanna. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Please go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hi, if that is this Johanna. Vandana Shiva, we met a couple of years ago live at the Real Truth About Health conference in Long Island, and we had a wonderful conversation. I am currently putting together a next level university, starting it online, and I am hoping that there will be a course that can be taught by you and by all the work that you have done that connects what you're so often speaking about, and that some few people teach, that colonialism feeds right into this super colonialism that we're experiencing right now, and how we see the signs of awakening everywhere in the end of the patriarchal age. Is that something that you have as a course?
Well, my book, Oneness versus 1%, is precisely on that. And if you want to follow up on anything, please write to earthuniversity@navdanya.net.
Thank you, Vandana. And up next we have, and again, I hope I am pronouncing this correctly, Mayuri. If you'd go ahead and unmute yourself, please.
Yeah, hi Vandana. I was just going to ask, thank you for the great talk. And I was just going to ask, what is the main difference between natural and Vedic farming versus organic? Because I read an article where it said organic was separate from natural or Vedic farming.
Okay, so I want to go back. Remember I mentioned Albert Howard, who was sent to India in 1905. And he watched the farms. So rich, he said, I can't improve this. I got to make the Indian peasant my professor. What was the Indian peasant practicing then? Vedic farming, yeah? Non-violence to the earth, working with the earth. What Howard wrote in the Agricultural Testament, available in the US through the Rodale Press, is what got to be called the organic movement. As I said, the organic word means living systems, working with living systems. It's both a science and a practice that comes from the science. Recently, so there are many systems that have grown out of working with nature. Permaculture is one, grew from Australia, where they realized the indigenous people used to farm with trees. So a permanent agriculture. Biodynamic farming, Rudolf Steiner, who came to India and realized that principles of agriculture are the same as the principles of Ayurveda, of the subtle energies. Many, many systems. People like Fukuoka in Japan wrote a book called The One Straw Revolution, called it natural farming. Now, so there are many names for farming with nature. More recently, the word natural farming has been promoted to attack organic because organic got organized. It was becoming a market, 25% growth. It had standards, and you couldn't get GMOs out there with organic. So to kill the GMO block, they floated an attack on organic. I know this because I've been through it in my country, you know. A fellow who knows nothing was floated. It's a natural farming guru. And his first sentence is always, earthworms are important. As if there are no earthworms in the soil. Organic is important. As if Harvard didn't learn organic from India and take it abroad. So organic is the alternative to industrial agriculture at the level of an organized system at a world scale. So they had to attack it. And then they created this ideology at this organic versus natural, which is ridiculous. True natural and true organic are the same. And then they went even further. 2.2 billion was borrowed from private banks, and farmers are forced to organize to be supply chain providers. So when you see attacks on organic, they're very often paid attacks by the industry itself. All ecological systems of farming might have different names. The principles are always the same. Work with nature, work with nature, work with nature for the health of the soil and the health of the people.
Vandana, there are no words to thank you enough. If I may say so, first of all, everybody can see on the screen, go for more to navdanya.org. So much more there that you can receive. I have to say, I think about Eckhart Tolle's great book, The Power of Now, and in there he refers to the collective insanity that we're all a part of. And if I may say so, I see you as the leader of what is a collective empowerment, and what the courage that must take is something beyond, I think, most of us will ever know. And so I want to thank you personally. The Real Truth About Health wants to thank you for all of your time and how gracious you were with everybody's questions. And if I may ask our tech team to unmute all of our audience, please let Vandana Shiva know how grateful you are. Let us hear it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Washington State.
Thank you so much.